Sea of Red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, we're back after the Four Nations face-off and our break, and as always, I'm Dan alongside Matt. Matt, I have to ask, did you watch any of the Four Nations face-off?
A little bit of the gold medal game. Uh, Personally, I was taking a little bit of the time off to do other things, because I'm currently in the midst of doing some house renovations, so I was focusing on that for that time, but did catch a bit of the gold medal game, and
You nor I were interested in this. I think I watched all of a period, and I mean, I saw some clips as I was out and about, and online and stuff. But actually, sitting down to watch it, I think I had about a period. I was with a friend who wanted to watch the first period of the gold medal game, just see what happened during the anthems, and that was about it.
yeah, and um, I found it fitting that McDavid played so poorly in the gold medal game that they kind of left him open, and that was the difference. Because he was very terrible from what I've heard,
Yeah,
except for the golden goal.
yeah, I didn't watch too much of it, so I can't comment on it. But I'm excited for international play next year at the Olympics, which I think will be real best on best.
Yeah, and to be fair, even though this was very much a slapdash tournament, I feel that the NHL did a good job in terms of generating buzz for the league, which the All-Star game is kind of supposed to do that, and really every year falls flat. And like we've seen, commentators on the NBA All-Star game, which was going on around the same time, and like how they were all like, this is absolute garbage compared to what the NHL is doing with the Four Nations Cup. So
And I don't think a lot of that was manufactured by the NHL. I think some of this was just right place, right time with the world, with the world politics the way they are.
yes, exactly. Like if there hadn't been the scandals with the booing of the anthems and the back and forth with the tariff nonsense, then the animosity would, like, it would have already been there, because like Canada and USA always face off against each other, and it's usually a tough game. Like the World Cup game in '96, like there was multiple fights. The first game against the Americans, there was multiple fights.
But it still
So
would have been hockey fans watching those. Like I think that some of the things that were outside the NHL's control brought a lot more eyes to this than there probably would have been otherwise.
I agree. And it was good timing for the NHL, and certainly, even though like I didn't really watch a ton of it, like I do find that the games were more interesting than what an All-Star game would produce. So I would not be opposed to them doing something like this, maybe rejigger the tournament itself to be more inclusive, or
I believe
find a
the plan is
different
to do this
way of
every
doing it.
second year. You're going to do
Yeah.
the All Star game and then the some sort of international. I think it'll be the World Cup every second year.
Yeah. And I think doing that also makes it so it doesn't get stale, like if they were to do it every year, and it also makes the All-Star game a little bit more important when it does show up, instead of it just being like a phoned in who cares by everybody.
We'll enjoy it more because we will have missed it. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Well, let's shift from that to the week the Flames have had. We have had 4 games since the conclusion of the Four Nations face-off. The first one was at home. The Flames came back to Calgary for 1 game before going on their season-long road trip, and that one was a 3-2 win over the San Jose Sharks. I was in the building for that one. I was disappointed that the Flames let the Sharks stay in it as much as they did in this one.
Honestly, if the Flames had played any of the other 30 teams in the NHL, they lose this game handily.
If they played
Uh,
that same game, yeah.
Yeah, like they had horseshoes that they were playing in San Jose, and San Jose is just that bad. Because frankly, as bad as San Jose is, they were kind of walking over the Flames for a good portion of the game. Which, when you have, Tyler Toffoli and an 18-year-old kid being the only two good players on the team, and you're allowing them to walk all over you. It's kind of not good.
Yeah, it was not a great showing for the Flames, but what we've seen so many times from the Calgary Flames, unfortunately, which is they play down to their opponent and it ends up costing them.
Yeah, like they did manage to salvage the 2 points and all of that. But, it was certainly not an inspiring effort by the team to get going on the lengthy 6 game road trip.
It was not for sure. We should point out though that the game-winning goal in this one, in the third period, Joel Hanley scores his first of the season. So, congratulations to him for getting on the board. He's been looking pretty good lately, and yeah, gets the win for the Flames. Always nice when there's that story.
Hmm.
Then the Flames started their road trip, and this is a long road trip. This is a season-long 6 game road trip. First game was in Washington, taking on the Washington Capitals. Ovechkin scored number 883 in this one, but the Capitals lost to the Flames. The Flames won 3-1 here. What were your overall thoughts?
I felt that this was kind of a repeat of the game that we just played against Washington, where both sides were basically doing fairly even. I didn't think that either team had a distinct advantage one way or the other, and we're kind of trading chances as at about an even clip. Like it was not a overwhelming like defensive breakdown at one end and then another defensive breakdown at the other end. I thought Vladar had a great game. I feel that he was the reason why they got the 2 points because he was there when they needed him. But like the Flames, even though they ended up getting the 2 points, the struggles on the offense in both of the San Jose and Washington games kind of foreshadowed what was to come in the week ahead because there just seems to be a lack of cohesion offensively from the group.
Yeah, you had pretty much all the same thoughts I did. I thought this is one of the better Dan Vladar games we've seen this year. But the Flames just again looked flat. And I don't know if it's coming off the break or what it is, but this is a team that is not looking like a. I mean, we've seen stints this season where this team looks like they're a playoff team, they're ready to go to the playoffs, and then we see games like this, and it kind of brings you back to who this team is.
Yeah, like it's unfortunate in games like this where like frankly like this is part of the reason why the Flames are stuck in the middle all the time because like they'll do just enough to get enough points in the standings to be not a bottom team, even though like offensively they are beyond terrible. And like you basically have to have a great offensive game from everybody just to get 3 goals in a game with this roster. And if they're not having a good night, then what happened in the following 2 games happens.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a team all year that has needed the entire team to be pulling the same direction to get wins. And I think we can say in these two, we didn't get that.
No, a very disastrous trip to Florida where they got shut out 3-0 in both games.
Well, and that's where I was going to go next. So the Flames take on now two of the best teams in the league going into Florida. Vasilevsky made 28 saves on the 27th of February as the Lightning got their seventh win, shutting out the Flames 3-0 here. Flames take more shots, but end up getting none of them in. And this is a game where I think we saw the Calgary Flames for what the Calgary Flames are, and that is, like you said, kind of a middling team. They look just overpowered in this game.
Yeah, like you ran into a brick wall against a team that actually knows how to play hockey at
Yeah,
a
and I
high
and I
level.
think the same. I think
Uh,
we give the same summary for both games in Florida. Like
yes.
you
Well,
played the game.
actually, like Tampa, they actually played respectably, even though they lost 3-0. The Florida game, they got ran over like they were yesterday's lunch.
I felt
Like
like the
it
Flames
was
started
bad.
okay in Florida, and then they quickly got deflated.
Yeah, like when you're being outshot like 27-8 at one point, you're not doing good. Like there's not really any positives other than, wow, Vladar's standing on his head in that particular contest. Like, that game could have easily been 7 or 8-0 if not for Vladar's wizardry in that one.
Yeah, it was. These were messy games for Flames fans, and you know, it's you and I both predicted losses in these games. I think this is pretty much what I was expecting it was going to be.
Yeah. Well, and like frankly, like I was not expecting them to beat Washington, and with their effort against San Jose, like what we had thought heading in was like 1-3, and like
Yeah,
frankly, with the efforts they gave, they should have been 1-3
and
if
I was
not for
kind of
San
hoping
Jose
they'd
being
ride that
terrible.
Washington wave to another win.
Yeah, but that was not the case at
And
all. And yeah,
the Flames play again tomorrow on a back to back, and then there's two more games on this road trip. So I think we're starting to see them run out. I didn't even know if they had gas to run out of gas, but I think we're seeing them on fumes, and I'm worried that this could be a winless road trip besides that first one.
yeah, and you're starting to see like other teams starting to clamp down, and they're actually engaging in the playoff push, and like they have the talent to back it up. Where Calgary, like unless they're getting full letter, performances from guys like Kadri, Huberdeau, etc., like they're not going to get a point in the game. And yeah, like in the Tampa game, like the only really good chance they had was by Huberdeau, and unfortunately it was a little too close to the goalie to elevate the puck over his pad, and like they didn't really set themselves up into high danger scoring areas in that game. In the Florida game, I don't even feel like they had a scoring chance the whole contest, and it's just tough to look ahead to the trade deadline that's coming up this week and say, oh, well, hey, we're 1 point out of a playoff spot, when, like, even if you're optimistic and say that the Flames get in, like, once they're playing whichever team that they would in the first round, they're going to get their heads shoveled in just like they did
But
against
I don't
Tampa
think
or
that's new
Florida.
information, though. I think that's the way it would have
No,
been, all season. Is if they snuck in, it was going to be, one and out.
no, but it's one of those things where it's tough to project ahead and plan ahead for the trade deadline, where like even if the best case scenario result happens, like you're going to lose probably in 4 games and be done. And like it's hard to say, like, justify adding at the trade deadline in that kind of
Well, let's
scenario.
come back to trade deadline discussion a little bit later. Right now, when we take a look at where the Flames are after these 4 games, they now sit 1 point outside of the wild card spot, the second one in the West, held by Vancouver at 65 points. Calgary has 64. They have 59 games played, 28 wins, 23 losses, 8 overtime losses for 64 points. And then Utah right behind them at 63. St. Louis right behind them at 62. San Jose or Anaheim, sorry, has actually been gaining some ground at 59. So if we take them out of the picture, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 teams between Vancouver, Calgary, Utah, and St. Louis, all within, it's called 4 points of each other, that are battling for that last spot. So yeah, it's definitely going to be, someone's going to have to either get in there and clamp it down, or you're going to see a lot of change, and this could come down to game 82.
Well, and you even have to look on the other side of the coin, where the Flames, with their top 10 protected pick, they're actually only 3 points above that line at this point. Like both the New York Islanders and Montreal Canadiens have 61 points as the 10th place team, and Calgary has 64. So it's not like the Flames would have to fall far to drop down if that's the direction that they're going to take either.
Very
So
true.
it's hard when like as good as the Flames season has been, like they're 17th in the NHL, and like they're 6 points behind LA. They're a point behind Vancouver. Vancouver's a better team than the Flames. Like it's just hard to have the expectation that like this team can actually push forward for a playoff spot at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we never expected them to, right? It was always
No.
kind of going in. We expected them to be out of the playoffs. It was a nice treat to see them doing well. So you and I have talked about this before the break, but um, if they make it, great. If they don't, well, it's still as expected.
Hmm.
So talking before we get to the trade deadline, talking about a few roster changes we've seen. Zari and Ball now back. Zari was back since the San Jose game. Ball came back, I believe, right after the Washington game. Um, so both those guys back in the lineup, which really gives the Flames a full lineup again. Part of their challenge lately has been that they really haven't had even for their sparsely populated defense, they really haven't had a full complement of defensemen. So seeing Ball back is nice. And on the defensive side, couple call-ups we've seen, Soloviev and Kuznetsov both called up and spent some time with the big club. What have you thought of those guys?
Well, Kuznetsov didn't play in any of the
No,
contests,
he didn't.
so I think it's good for him to get some experience, at least practicing with the big club. And I thought Soloviev played a fairly decent, responsible defensive game. And I know on the advanced stats sheet, like it's not showing very well. And he did make a couple of mistakes, but frankly, in terms of defensive play, I felt that he has been better in his games with the Flames this season than some of the other defensemen have that have cycled through the 6, 7, 8 spots.
Yeah, I mean, he made mistakes, but he's also a call up. You kind of expect your call ups to make mistakes, right? That's why they're home in the American Hockey League. And, the Flames are also at a point, as we've talked about, where I think they can afford mistakes from these guys. So it's not a huge deal that he's making those. But I think Soloviev looks better this year than he did last year for sure. He's looking like he's a better, I'd say, rounded defenseman. And I think he could make a legitimate push for the roster next year.
I agree. And it's nice to see them trying some guys out and like getting like a guy like Kuznetsov familiar with the NHL team as well. Considering the trade deadline is coming up and defensemen are always at a premium at the trade deadline, and the Flames have a number of good 5, 6 guys that teams like to covet for depth during their playoff runs. You know, guys like Hanley and Bean are actually commodities that are attractive to teams at the trade deadline. So, like there might be spots on a more permanent basis opening up in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. And Tyson Berry sent down to the Wranglers, cleared waivers and sent down. We saw him sent down earlier as a conditioning stint, but now I guess a full time or a regular player there. I'm not at all surprised they cleared waivers.
No, that game against Toronto was the death knell of his career. Like, unless he somehow manages to figure out how to skate at a higher level again over the off season. Um, like I do not see any NHL team offering him a contract. They might offer him a PTO, but like he's kind of being forced into the either retire or go to Europe route.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know that we've seen the end of him in the NHL. I'm not sure if I'm at that point yet, but I just think that, what, everyone probably has something like him or thinks they can acquire better than him. Like, it doesn't surprise me that he cleared waivers. And I
No,
think,
and I feel bad for Tyson Berry, the player or the person, because you know by all measures he is a very good person in the room and well liked by the team. It's just on ice results matter, and because of the quasi playoff push, like this team needs to cut bait with a player that's not quite up to it.
you know what though? I mean, there, as much as you're saying going over to Europe, playing in the American League is still playing professional hockey. And I could see a guy like him even take an AHL deal or have some team, sign him to a two-way deal with the expectation they'll be sort of that veteran in the AHL next year, just because of the leadership that he has. And I think that'd be totally respectable if he just took the AHL deal next year.
Yep. Although he has made like over $45 million in his NHL career, so it depends on how passionate.
He'd be playing because he wants to play,
Yeah.
right? And for a lot of these guys, they want to play. They want to play as long as they can. It's what they know.
Yep.
Well, Matt, I think that's all the big stories. I mean, there's a lot of small stuff we could talk about since the Flames came back, but with those things discussed, let's look ahead to the trade deadline. I know there's always one of your favorite shows every year. We are recording this on the 1st of March, which means with the deadline on the 7th, we're about a week away. We're already seeing trades made, 3 trades made already today. But let's focus in on the Flames. So, what do you think the Flames should be doing at the deadline?
Realistically, if I'm Craig Conroy, I'm basically not like, unless you're talking like the young guys like Ball, Coronado, Zari, etc., Wolf, like those guys to me are off limits because like there's just no sense in trading them in any way, shape, or form. But if you're over the age of 25, I am shopping basically anybody hard to see what's available in terms of return and you know uh, is it feasible to do so because of players modified no trade clauses, no movement clauses, etc., and seeing would be a potential return for say a guy like Kadri or Huberdeau or Coleman or insert any name here, and be doing my full due diligence over this next week.
So you mentioned something important there, and we see a lot of fans online, fantasy trading, trade this guy for that guy. And we had someone who was chatting with us on Twitter about a package they wanted to put together that included Nazem Kadri to Buffalo for Dylan Cousins. And I reminded him, Kadri gets to decide where he goes. That's baked into his contract. So if you're going to have that discussion, how do you convince him to go to Buffalo? Like, I don't think you could. And that's why I think, like you said, you've got to look at, those considerations, but also the length of the contract. Like, I don't think anybody in the NHL right now would want to take on $7 million Nazem Kadri until 2029.
They might like if the Flames ate a million or two of that, then I'm sure, like we saw with the Seth Jones trade today, where Chicago ate $2.5 million of his $9 million a year contract for the next 5 seasons. Like getting Seth Jones at $6.5 million is a lot more palatable.
Seth Jones also 30 compared to 34 for Nazem Kadri.
True, but Kadri plays a premium position. He plays it well. He's a good two-way guy. He's more of a playoff guy. Um, and he brings that fiery agitatorness. So, and he's a cup winner and generally a proven guy, even though he is the age he is. If the Flames were to say make him a $5.5 to $6 million player, he instantaneously is like worth a first plus, and and a significant plus. So it'll be interesting to see, and
If that happens, Matt, I think that happens in the off season.
it depends. It depends on the market itself because of the fact that, frankly, there are not very many centers available. And if you have, like say a Toronto or a Colorado who needs a dependable, proven second line center, they might be willing to say, well, to hell with it. I'll pay the extra bit to, make sure we get the asset now for this year's run, especially if you're thinking like you might actually have a shot at the cup, like say Toronto does or like Colorado does this
Yeah,
year.
I'm just saying that I don't know if those teams want to tie up that long term money because there's a couple big fish potentially on the free agent market that they might want to keep their money for.
Hmm. I agree. It'll be interesting to see. And frankly, I feel like this is kind of like the second phase of the retool where frankly the Flames I feel have enough veterans that even in the younger guys, like getting guys like Frost and Farabee who mostly play the game the right way, and some of the young guys that the Flames already have in the system playing, that you can shed some more players that are the veteran guys, like the Colemans, like the Backlunds, like the Kadris, without actually negatively impacting the course of the whole retool, rebuild situation that the team is in.
Yep, for sure. So let's go through these names one at a time then and talk about who we think maybe there'd be a market for. How about that?
Sure.
Huberdeau.
Honestly, I think that there's more of a market for him due to the resurgence of his scoring touch and the fact that the cap's going up. Because, instead of it being like a $10 million player, like next year, it's more like an $8 million player. And if the Flames were, again, to eat some of the contract, which the Flames might have to do, um, like if the Flames could hypothetically get out of Huberdeau's contract, they should explore it. Um, and by all means, make the trade if you can.
Who do you think would be wanting to bring Huberdeau in?
Basically, any team that has shooters and plenty of them, because he is still a good passer. It's just the Flames don't have anybody to pass it to. So that's part of the reason why Huberdeau's been more of a shooter this year, because, well, if I can't send anybody up, I'll just do it myself. And
to me, I don't want the Flames eating these long-term deals this year. I think that they're going to have some deals like a Wolf deal, Zari deal coming up that I think that you're going to need money for, and I don't want to have $5 million of dead cap space until 2031.
no, but at the same rate, though, is getting out of like $8 million worth of, or $7 million worth of Huberdeau's contract like 4 years from now matter more for you today than having the $10 million cap hit down the road when you're trying to compete.
I don't even think they can move Huberdeau right now. They'll be under the cap floor.
Well, here, give us your overpaid expiring contracts.
Yeah, I don't know. I would be shocked if Huberdeau moves.
I
I'd
would
be
too.
Shocked if
Like my thought process with him is it's about a 2 out of 10 that he would move. But, I think like the desire from the Flames to trade that contract is always going to be a 10 out of 10 for the duration of the deal.
I just think that if you're looking for that player, especially a guy who's only really looked good for 1 year, you could find something similar for your playoff run for cheaper.
I agree. And that's where like price tag comes into it and all of that kind of thing.
Farabee's not moving.
No,
Frost's not moving.
definitely not.
I don't see them moving the captain this year, not at the deadline.
Unless he specifically asks for it, then sure. But I think that you'll more likely see his playtime get reduced into next season and then traded at next year's deadline.
I don't see Coleman moving at this year's deadline.
I'm about 50-50 on him just because of the fact that he has such a pedigree and is like, what he is. He's a good second, third line winger that's great at both ends of the ice. I think that every team would want him that's in the playoffs. It's just making the money work. Like, say, like Toronto, for example, just because I brought them up already, like them dumping Reeves on us to eat the money, make the difference, and that would be like a scenario where that would work for both sides to facilitate a deal. So getting
Coleman is a 10-team trade list right now, so still some opportunity to trade him if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Sharon Govich not going anywhere. I don't think anybody wants to go near that with an extension on the horizon.
No, unfortunately, the length of the contract and like him having one good year and then this year has been a disaster for him, not due to his fault. Getting hurt at the beginning of the year derails every player at the beginning of the year because basically all your training in the off season gets thrown in the toilet and you have to start during the season, and every player that gets
Not
hurt,
having a good year.
every player struggles in a year that they get hurt in the first month.
Frost is an RFA. He's not going anywhere. They'll qualify him, no problem.
Yeah.
Lombard, I don't think you shop at all. Like they like his leadership.
Maybe next year at the deadline if you need to, but then again, like that's kind of like the trade deadline day trade of sure, let's just go have fun, try to win a cup.
And I think you give Lombard the option to resign here first.
Yes, exactly.
Kevin Rooney's a UFA. Does anybody want Kevin Rooney?
Honestly, because he's a center, I am sure that he will actually get traded at the deadline for like a 7.
You think we'll see him moved?
Out of the entire team, he is the one player that I'm most confident will get traded for like a 7th round pick, because every team likes to have a spare center that can actually win a faceoff, and Rooney can do that. So,
do you think we get our old friend Mr. Considerations back?
Conditional 7th if you win the cup, I guess, or something like that.
Conditional 7th if he wins a faceoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not be sad to see him go. I mean, you're short a center then, and they need centers. But if you can
honestly, you just recall from the farm, and who cares? Like,
if you can get anything greater than Considerations, take it.
Yeah.
Postel's not going anywhere.
No.
Coronado's not going anywhere. Zari's not going anywhere. No value in Klapka. On the back end, Uyghur doesn't go anywhere. I still don't think Anderson moves. I know you thought he would, but I don't think he moves this year.
I think it's about a 5 to 10% chance that he moves this year. And seeing the Seth Jones trade, I think that might wake up the Flames a bit, going, hey, if a guy that's like a number 3 that's way overpaid got that return, what the hell can we get for Anderson? And teams tend to do stupid things at the trade deadline when it comes to defensemen. Like, remember the Ben Sherratt for a first plus like a handful of things a few years ago? And, like every year there's just a really dumb trade like the Seth Jones trade, where here, let's just give you everything for insert blue liner here. And the fact that Anderson's actually a good player on top of it, like you could end up walking away with 3 or 4 good assets if you traded him.
He has a 6-team no trade list. So there's 32 team or 24 teams, let's call it, that could be dumb enough to take him for a haul.
Yeah. Basically, no Vancouver, no Edmonton, no Buffalo, and insert 3
Probably
other
Winnipeg.
bad teams.
That's the number 1 that's on the no trade list.
San Jose, maybe in Chicago, maybe.
Yep, could definitely be. I think there's a chance the Flames move a defenseman. Like you said, there's always a market for defensemen at the deadline. I mean, we saw Treliving kind of bring in a random D-man every year.
Yeah,
I don't think it's Ball.
No, I think that both Hanley and Bean will be likely to move. Hanley a lot more so than Bean, but I think that teams might take Bean too, because he's not being
Hanley's 787, and he's a UFA at the end of the year. Bean is 1.7, and he's got 2 years.
Yeah, like realistically, I think that with both of their play, that teams would easily acquire. Like I expect Rooney and Hanley for sure to be gone at the trade deadline.
What do you think you get for Hanley?
Probably a 7th round pick. Like not much, and like Bean probably a 5th. So again, not much, but the team might just want to free up spots just for, because you have 3 guys on the farm that are basically graduating to the NHL with Soloviev, Kuznetsov, and Poirier. They're all doing really well down there. You need to actually create some spots in the NHL so that way you can actually see what you have, especially next year with all 3 of those guys being waiver eligible. You don't want to lose an actual decent young player on waivers for nothing, and better to get a book on him now while you can.
Any value in Mirmanov?
Honestly, I forgot him on the list. I would expect him to get dealt to if anybody would want him. I
don't think anybody wants him.
No.
Everybody's got a project defenseman somewhere in their system. And he's 27.
Like realistically, he's more likely headed to the Wranglers than to replace insert call up here than to get traded.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I don't think they will move Braden Pahal.
No, Pahal has done everything you want out of being a number 6. And it's like, okay, I'd like to see more of him in order to see, if there is more of a ceiling than, just being a good number 6.
Not moving Wolf. What's your book on Vladar? We've gone back and forth on him so far.
Well, having 2 very good games against 2 of the elite teams in the NHL, I think he's like, hey, I can still play at the NHL level. If you want a goalie for a playoff run, here, come get me. So
Question is, who needs a goal?
yeah, he did. Well, to be blunt, there's a team in the province that does. Like, he would be their starting goalie. Like, that's how bad. Even Vancouver could probably use him. There
You'd
are
be
a number
asking
of
a
teams.
premium,
LA
I
could
think,
use
from
them.
either of those teams.
Yeah. Well, frankly, there are no good goalies available at the deadline, and Vladar is probably the best guy available. So whether it's LA, Vancouver, or Edmonton, like you look at Edmonton's depth, like they don't even have like beyond Skinner, like it's only Calvin Pickard and Rodrigue in the farm. Like they don't even have a good young goalie or some anything to get excited about in the goaltending position at all. So like they really do need to shore that up somehow, especially if they're trying to win a Stanley Cup this year. Like
Question is, what does Edmonton have you want?
they have draft picks. They have some prospects. They're not good, but you know, give us draft picks and whatever your best prospects are, and sure, we can figure it out. Like
With Vancouver neck and neck with Calgary, I'm not sure you do a deal with them because that could cost you your playoff spot.
yeah. And realistically, with Lankinen and Seelovs, I feel that they have enough goaltending where
I think get through the year.
yeah, like realistically, with Demko being hurt and kind of perpetually, and probably they're going to move on from him, especially with re-signing Lankinen. I think that they're kind of just wanting to see what they have in the 2 other guys first. And with both of those guys being relatively young and decent, it's kind of like getting Vladar would just be adding a 3rd guy to that same pile.
Yeah.
Uh, because he's not better than the other 2. Where like
I think that if they're going to go after Vladar, they go after him as a UFA once they see what they've got internally.
yeah, and like where, frankly, Vladar in Edmonton would probably be their starter, and that's just how bad their goaltending is. And like Edmonton, like if they're not desperate for goaltending, like their general manager should be fired level of like this is pretty much like the difference between them actually being a potential actual cup caliber team and them getting bounced in the first or second round. And I think that they're heading more in that trajectory than they are in the cup caliber thing, just because the goaltending is that terrible.
Yeah, I've lost track of who they changed GM so often. It's Stan Bowman now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it's still Jeff Jackson. Like I don't know. They've gone through so many GMs. I think that if Vladar moves, the Oilers make the most sense. As much as I don't want to do a deal with the Oilers, I think that's the one team I can see needing a goaltender and going out and getting one. I think it would have to be a pure futures deal, though. You don't want anything off their roster, and they're not going to give up anything off their roster.
No, and you wouldn't want anything off their roster right now. Like I would have liked a Holloway or Broberg, but they play for St. Louis now. So
I was going to say you have to call a different team in blue for those guys.
Yes, exactly. No, and realistically, the Oilers are. They remind me a little bit of like teams like Washington and Pittsburgh from like 15 years ago, like where like they had most of what they needed, but like either their defense or their goaltending was just suspect enough. Like when Marc-Andre Fleury would give up like 7 goals a game in the playoffs, like he did against the Flyers that one year, and like I just don't see Edmonton actually being a realistic contender if they don't shore up the goaltending. Um, Mind you, the Oilers have a number of problems, but like they're the only team that's in a playoff spot that's like actually should be desperate for goaltending. Like everybody else kind of has either guys of Vladar's caliber or better. Um, and even like LA, it would be to back up Kemper, not somebody better than Riddick, but not you know a starter where Vladar would be the starter in LA or in Edmonton.
So going back to the question I asked you, just to give my thoughts on it, what should the Flames do? I think that the Flames, obviously, if you get a good deal, you take it. If you get, the moon for Anderson, you do it. But what do I think the strategy probably is going in? You're not acquiring anything unless it's, a hockey deal. I think you're not
Yeah,
going to trade your way into the playoffs this year. You can't do that.
no, like if a deal like the Frost Farabee trade where you're basically looking at it going, well, duh, of course you make that trade. Unless one of those falls in your lap,
But you
which it
generally get
could.
one hockey deal a year, and that's, I
Yeah.
think, the end of it.
Yeah, and like realistically, there's not going to be another situation where, oh, here, let's give you like 2 mid-20s, second, third line guys for basically nothing. Like that's not going to happen again.
And I don't even think the Flames should be out there shopping their veterans like you do. I mean, if you get a call, sure, but I think right now you should stand pat with what you've got.
Well, frankly, I'm more of the view of, well, like this team can't score. So, frankly, like they need to find roster spots available in their organization so that way they can either, acquire players at the draft or in free agency that can help to actually address the we can't score at all
But
problem
do you
that
need to
this
be
team.
able to score if you're in a rebuild?
Well, if you're wanting to facilitate the development of guys like Coronado and Zari and insert miscellaneous prospects here, like they need to be able to much like with the AHL and like why it's important to have a good AHL team is so that way like your good prospects can actually have somebody to pass and receive passes from. And like if the Flames don't have any shooters, like a guy like Zari is very much a two-way playmaking type player. He doesn't have a line mate that he can reliably pass to that can actually shoot the puck at the net. And so like it's hurting his game and his development by not having somebody who can actually shoot the puck. And like yes, you could put him
But
with
I don't think that
Coronado.
anybody you bring in, though, is going to be significantly better than what they've got.
No, but like the Flames should be hunting this offseason for
Sure, but the
scoring.
offseason's the offseason. I think that's
No,
different
I
than
know. Well, in order to clear spots on the roster, like you can't have like 12 forwards heading into the offseason because like realistically the only forward that you're getting rid of at the end of the year is Rooney and that's it. Like that everybody else is in their roster spot. So like unless you clear room, you're full already. So,
I get what you're saying. I just wouldn't be out there shopping those. I don't think you're going to get the best return for them now.
no, but it's also one of those where like say like hypothetically you got a second and a third round pick for Blake Coleman. Yeah, that it feels a little light, but is okay. But you're also freeing up $5 million and a roster spot, which you can then throw at, say, the draft, and use the second and third round pick to go get insert miscellaneous, the Frost and Farabees of, whichever team, feels like they want to move in a different direction after the season. And target whatever you can find.
But if you're going to make a deal with another team, you're going to need an asset to do that. Like, I think if that's the way you want to go, you keep those guys now and you can move them as part of that deal.
True. It just depends. Like if you're taking it like more like how like Vancouver operated things, like where they got a first for JT Miller and then flipped that immediately for a good defenseman. Like they in effect did a three-way trade with Pittsburgh where, the just with added steps. And I think like if you were to say deal a Coleman or a Kadri or whomever, utilizing those assets that you get to, in essence, flip them for something else. Like if the
So
Flames,
it sounds like you're maybe thinking of something. What are you expecting the Flames to do there?
well, every year there always seems to be young players generally that fall out with their organization, sort of like Holloway did and Broberg did, um, who have been really good with St. Louis. And much like the Frost and Farabee trade, like every year there's usually a handful of guys like that that are available and that get traded at the draft. And like if
So
the Flames had,
if you move one of those big names, then what do you give up to get that guy?
well, like how the Flames got that second round pick for Mangiapane, freed them up to move their own second round pick in the Frost Farabee trade because they had a pick that's basically in the same ballpark. So like if you say got a second round pick, say even for this year or next year, you can kind of, like whether it's our pick going or, insert miscellaneous other picks here, you can kind of justify it. Like say like the late first that we get from New Jersey is only like 12 spots away from like our second round pick that we get. You might move that for late first in the trade, knowing that you have the second that's in the same ballpark, that kind of thing. So
I get where you're
it
coming
just gives
from.
you
It's
more.
not what I would do. I think that if you're going to move a veteran, that chance would still be there in the offseason if you want to do that. Like, I think you could say move, let's just say Toronto. You move Kadri to Toronto and then go make your other deal at a similar time. That's my thought on it.
Oh yeah. How would you say the only difference basically is each has their own flaws and strengths, and like they just it depends on the flexibility that you and the other teams have, etc., at the draft and all that kind of stuff. It'll be interesting to see. Like, honestly, I feel like there's kind of a hybrid where the Flames will do both A and B, where maybe trading one of the guys at the deadline, and then another one in more of the trade that you're discussing at the draft as well.
Yeah, or sometime in the summer.
Yeah,
What should the Flames not do? What would you be
add
disappointed if?
if they use any young asset to add, unless it's in a similar vein as the Frost Farabee deal, where well, duh, like I would not touch any player with a 10-foot pole for adding to this team at the deadline, just because
So you think so when we're saying any young players, we're saying kind of anybody. You probably don't want to add anybody over 28 or over 3 years on a deal.
uh over the age of 26, and I don't mind necessarily a long-term deal if the guy you're going to get him at a bargain because he has like 4 years left, that
I
kind of
think
thing.
there's one caveat on that, and that's if you're pretty much getting them for free or you're getting paid to take it.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll talk about that one in our next point. But I totally agree with you. The Flames should not be trying to add their way into the playoffs here. I think you've got to, if you move guys, fine. But I think you've got to be letting this team and this roster shake things out. You and I have talked about this in the past. Will we be disappointed if the Flames don't weaponize their cap space?
Well, yeah, frankly, they did as much as they could last year. Last year being such a hectic, crazy situation with so many people needing to be moved. Um, but I feel that this year, like they can easily get, players dumped on their lap. to just, here, eat this contract and, whatever. Um, I feel like the Flames are the excellent broker in this case, and that this is also part of the reason why I feel like it wouldn't be a bad idea if the Flames moved off of a few people, just so that way it frees spots up in case of roster dumps.
See, I think they're gonna have a good idea of who probably wants a roster dump. They've probably been in discussion. I don't think you move a guy unless you're pretty sure that you're gonna be getting somebody back.
Yeah, and realistically, I feel that the Flames probably will eat, insert contract, like half contract here as player moves from team A to team C. Um,
Yeah, they may not actually get the player on their roster, but I think it would be if they're not taking on, let's call it a reverse Monahan type deal where you're just taking on a guy to get them out of somebody else's roster, they should at least be brokering. And I mean, we saw some of that last year where teams would not even get the guy, right? They just take the deal. And I mean, we did a couple of those, at least one, where we would just trade him somebody and move him on. Like I think Conroy somehow has to find a way to use this cap space to his advantage.
yeah, like even if you're getting a fourth round pick for playing broker, honestly, the Flames, because of where they're at in their rebuild, getting as many darts to throw at the board as possible, every one of them's helpful. So, if you can get free assets for, you know, playing accountant, why not?
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's been a decision to have this space, and you have to utilize it. And when I look at some of the teams last year and what they were able to utilize, I'm going, why would you not do this, right? I mean, even Florida now, they've got 550,000 of current cap space, and not even enough to make one call up. I wouldn't be surprised if them or somebody else just needs to move a body out. And if you're the Flames, you'd be happy to take that body. Or I think the Flames still have two because they're still paying off Markstrom's. They've got two retained contracts,
spots,
that they can hold. So yeah, I have a feeling that if we see the Flames take on a body, it'll be a late day move. I think that's the kind of thing that somebody looks at the end of the day and goes, okay, I'm heavy, I just got to quickly dump this on Conroy.
yeah. And you might see trades like how like tra team trades player X to player, to a different team, and like they're like the Seth Jones trade, and like they just need to free up some cap space. So here we'll trade this okay, like third, fourth line depth guy that's actually a fairly okay player, but we just need the cap space here. Just take him. That kind of thing. Like I could see the Flames engaging in that kind of
Yeah,
situation
kind of the
as well.
reverse Monahan thing. We just need some cap space. Take him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think whether a body ends up on the Calgary roster or just a paper transaction through Calgary, I think Conroy needs to do something. I mean, even today, there's two trades. One had a 50% retention in Charlie Lindgren. One had 26 in Seth Jones. Like, you got to be calling these guys saying, we'll take that. But at the same time, you only get two. So you got to do it smartly. You don't want to take on a million for somebody and then be.
Yeah, and that's where like you might just take the guy's entire deal. And like there are certain young players that have like a 3 or 4 year deal on them but they're still just a depth guy where they might want to just move on from the depth guy, even though he's a reasonable player at his position at that paycheck, just to get that flexibility. And like the Flames should be targeting that type of player regardless of, the timing of the season. And
Yeah, I think that if we don't see the Flames utilize the cap space somehow, I'm going to be disappointed.
oh, very much so.
Like you have to do a deal somehow that chews into that available cap space, whether you get the player or you broker the player. That's got to happen for these guys.
I agree.
Last thing on our trade deadline preview, Dylan Cousins, a name that's been bandied around the Flames for a while. Let's assume here, you tell me if there's a fair assumption, none of the guys that have any sort of modified no trade want to go to Buffalo. Fair assumption?
Yeah, I would guarantee that.
So then what assets do you have to get Cousins? Like, I'm surprised this discussion keeps happening in the Sea of Red. What do you give up that they want then?
We're not good trading partners, frankly. Like they are stacked on defense, So are the Flames. We don't have any centers. They do, and like they have plenty of winger prospects. Like we're just not a good fit for one another. And
I just can't see if you take all the guys with some sort of a no trade off, what you're going to give up.
no, and like realistically, like the only guy that makes any sense for Buffalo would be Zane Parekh, and there's no chance that I would trade Parekh for Cousins. Like Parekh is actually looking like he's been on over a 2 point per game pace since the calendar year started of 2025.
OHL player of the month, 2 months in a row.
Yeah, like he had 31 points in 14 games last month. Like if they did the redraft today, like Parek's probably going second overall, and like that's the only player that realistically would be valuable enough to trade for Cousins, and Cousins isn't that good. So as much as it sucks, like the Flames are going to have to be bad enough to draft their own centers, and like they're going to have to get lucky at drafting centers whenever they're picking. And, like they're going to need to hit on a second round pick guy or a third round pick guy or a first round pick and have that guy turn into a top six center. Like Cousins is okay, but like I don't view him as being anything more than frankly like what Michael Backlund was when he was that age. Like an okay second, third line center. Whoop-de-doo. Like
Fans get excited for trades. We can't make trades just for the sake of making trades at this point. They need to be smart trades. And I just don't see what you would give up. Like, I'm surprised the fans have been talking about Dylan Cousins for so long. I don't see any package that makes sense.
no, like frankly, we got the rough equivalent in the Morgan Frost trade for Cousins, and we got him for a second round pick where Cousins is likely going to take a first plus, another like first round caliber player or prospect. And like it just does not make any sense for where this team is at to shed that kind of asset for a guy that's frankly been kind of terrible outside of 1 year with Buffalo.
Which is
Like,
why they'd want to move him.
and like, frankly, I'd rather take a run at Trevor Zegras than Cousins because Zegras probably will only cost you a second round pick at this point.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you agree with me there because I'm surprised by, all the people and how long this Dylan Cousin thing has lasted because there's nobody wants to, like, I could see you convincing somebody to go to Anaheim if for nothing else than living in Anaheim, but there's no way you convince any of your guys with any sort of no move to go to Buffalo.
Well, and it's not like it would be different if Buffalo had a long-standing tradition of being a decent to good team in the same way that, like, say, Boston has been. But they've been, not only is their city kind of mediocre on NHL standards, they're also in, like where the winters there, they just get dumped snow on all the time. And their team has been terrible for the last 15 years. So it's like, oh, gee, woo, like let's go to Buffalo.
Might as well
like,
stay in Calgary.
like,
The snow and a crappy rink.
like at least we have the mountains. Like unless you're an American player who wants to play in America, that would basically be the only upgrade between Buffalo and Calgary. And
But
yeah,
even then, I'm sure if you want out that badly, they'd find another American city for you.
exactly. And yeah, like it's just one of those things where like there's no real good synergy between the two teams. And like there are a lot of other teams. Like I would be more likely to see a Trevor Zegras plus four Cousins trade than, seeing either of those parts going to Calgary.
I totally agree. So, for those that are going to be doing armchair GMing over the next week leading up to the trade deadline, just remember all those conditions on deals, right? This in your Xbox where you can go into commissioner mode and trade wherever you want to for whoever you want to. We've had people tweet us and email us about fantasy trades, and we always tell them with the response is always, how do you sell that guy on Buffalo, or how do you sell that guy on this place or that place. So as you're getting excited and thinking these through, and again, it's okay to be excited, but really think about, you know, some of those conditions. You can find those online if you're not sure. Easy to figure out what conditions are where, but remember, there's a lot more that goes into this that you know, you may not just see when you're thinking about names in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So, Matt, let's move off trade deadline. Let's look at the week that is coming. You and I will talk again on the 9th, 2 days after the trade deadline. The trade deadline is Friday the 7th, and the Flames don't play. They'll be on their way back home from their road trip. So they have 3 games left in this road trip. You and I record Saturday night, and they play Sunday, a 3 p.m. game against the Carolina Hurricanes. Then Tuesday, 5 p.m. start in Calgary time against the Philadelphia Flyers. And then Thursday at 6 p.m. Calgary start time against the Dallas Stars. Then they have Friday off for the deadline, and Saturday they're back home taking on the Montreal Canadiens at 5 p.m. So you and I didn't do well last time. You and I had the same prediction. We thought they would win against San Jose, lose the rest. What are you thinking this time?
I'm gonna go as dark as the Flames third jerseys. 0-4.
You're going into dark mode.
Yep. I think that they're going to get skunked this week. And usually the first game back after a long road trip, and it does not matter what team at what time, you always pretty much lose the first game. It's something like 80% of the time the home team loses that one after a 5+ game road trip. So, and plus Montreal's actually fighting for a playoff spot. So,
and especially if there's some changes in the room, there's going to be some stuff going on in their heads.
Yeah, and frankly, like,
sorry, when I say stuff going on in the room, I mean like guys coming or going.
Yeah, and frankly, between Carolina and Dallas, like, I do not expect them to win. Like, they struggle in both of those buildings anyway. Then add, everything that's been going on. Like, even best case scenario, I would have penciled those in both for losses. And the one that for me was a coin toss would be the Flyers game, and they've actually been a little rejuvenated since the deal, so might as well go 0-4.
I'm going to say they lose everything but the Flyers game. I'm hoping that Frost and Farabee go in there and light up their old team.
Yeah. Hey, Torts.
I'm hoping Kuzmenko stinks, and Flyers and Farabee can go in there and light up their old team.
Yep.
So I'm going to say they lose everything but that Flyers game. Now, we've seen a really good Dan Vladar this week. Where would you put him going into this?
I would alternate them.
Games?
I'd put Wolf in tomorrow and just alternate until the trade deadline.
So you're saying Wolf would play Carolina and Dallas, and
Vladar
would get the easy start against the Flyers?
Yes.
There's some merit to that for sure. I mean, a lot of people have said that Wolf hasn't been getting, the top starts, and these are 2 top teams. And I think, Wolf's going to have to face top teams. I don't expect him to look great, but I think he's got to learn how to do that. So I could see them swapping it where Wolf plays, let's say, Carolina and Philly, and give Vladar one of the hard games. But I think I would go the way you did, and I would give Wolf the 2 hard games, see what he's got, and give Vladar the Philly game, and then if Vladar is still here, you give him Montreal.
Yep. Well, and realistically,
I'm Cooley. I don't know.
I'm not expecting Vladar to be here after this week, to be honest. Especially with the 2 performances he put up. Like, anybody that is looking for a goaltender would be watching how he would play in those games, and boy, did he stand on his head and look good against 2 of the elite teams in the NHL. So, if you wanted to sell
one or 2 teams that would want him.
Yeah, like, if you're gonna want to sell yourself to, hey, acquire me, like, that's basically the 2 best performances that you could possibly give in that circumstance. So good on him.
Goalie, get your goalie here.
Yep.
That's pretty much what he's trying to hawk himself to the other GMs. Get your goalie here, backup or starter.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I know what you're saying by thinking he won't be here. I don't know what the market is like. I don't know what teams are willing to pay to get him.
No, and
Calgary would
realistically,
be perfectly fine to hang on to him.
realistically, like my expectation is like a second round pick and maybe a fifth or something, or equivalent prospect. Like I'm not expecting a huge return on Vladar, but something along that line.
Yeah, I don't know. For a fifth, I think they might just hold on to him.
Well, a second and a fifth, but
Second
we'll
and
see.
fifth, sure, I could see. If it's just a fifth, I think they'd
No.
hang on to him.
Yeah, same here.
Because I think they really like Devin Cooley getting, big minutes in the AHL, and you would need to bring in, if you're going to move Vladar out, I think you've got to bring in a goalie, because I don't think you want to bring Cooley up.
No, and especially with Ignatiev playing well as well in the AHL, you're wanting to see, is he actually performing at that level consistently as well? And
Yeah. And I think in either of the scenarios you mentioned, like if it was Edmonton, I could see him getting Picard back or, a Rodrigue back. If it's LA, it'd be kind of weird if David Riddick landed back here.
hey,
Does he get the same stall back? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think they would have to take a goalie back in that case.
yeah, and I would assume so. Like that would be part of the deal. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, Matt, we will see what happens. I think with 3 trades already on March 1st, it's going to be a fun week and an interesting week.
One last question. Prediction for this week. How many trades did the Flames make total? Not counting the ones they already did.
Including anything that might be future considerations or brokering?
Yes.
3.
I'll go with 5.
Wow, okay.
Yep. So that'll be our secondary weekly predictions.
I'll add that to our predictions, and we'll see if we have a tiebreaker, we'll go with that.
Yep.
All right, well, we will talk to you after the trade deadline, and we'll see how this week goes for the Calgary Flames.
And as always, go Flames go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.